A generation of generations ago, when they came in their long ships and took their land as their own. I don't blame our people for fighting like death. And at the last upon this coast, once the great people have gone, calling upon the old powers, those demons that have been banished from this land for 400 years, they called upon in their last extremity. And the great demons rose and smote the people back in their long ships. And they called upon their own powers. And in the air and on the heaven and in the water there was a battle. But our folk who had forgotten their new faith, in their terror fled. And our powers, our old gods, crept. They crept into the pools, into the dark places of this world, and were forgotten. And their new gods, Tundra, Woden and the rest, declared their triumph over this land. 200 years ago or so. And then, new faith spread, kings accepted and rejected what they liked. And my folk became a little better than churls, to be called wherefore or dismissed. Now, I don't complain. This Lord, Thrythgeir he calls himself, is decent enough. But he built his all too close to the darkest of all the meres. The one they know that she is in. Lady Greenhair and her son hunts there. Not that the Lord cared much. We didn't go in that pool. It was us who has to wash the clothes. It was us who saw her come at night. Oh, occasionally one of his warriors would go fishing and not return. And so the pair of them kept themselves full for generations of men. And then the whole spread. A little town gathered. There was noise and there was clamour. I remember my dad went before Thrythgeir and said, "Look, that there is a pool here, has been quiet enough. But now you have many men gathered. Do not expect it all to be quiet." And Thrythgeir looked at him in fury and said, "By the name of the gods, old and new, why do you bring me such a curse?" And my father stood up to him and said, "It's not a curse. It's just the way things are. There are powers older than your gods, old or new, that lie in the meres of this land." And Thrythgeir banished my father there and then. He went back to his old people in the west, but I stayed to earn what silver I can. I'm quite good at cards, one way or t'other. And the folk here, they respect me well enough. I carry a dagger. If they'll let me, I'll carry a sword as well as any of them. I fight in their raiding parties good enough, although I never quite forget where I came from. And so his town spread and awakened the hunger of the sun. 2 creatures there are, Lady Greenhair and her green-haired son. Children of lesser gods, perhaps, or older gods. I remember the first night. Outside there was darkness. Now, I am no fool. I go to bed with charms. I warned them all that it would happen. And do you know what their reward was? To make me watch the all. But what good was that? For these creatures bring sleep as their charm, so that you look at them as if in a vision, and you cannot move, unless you are some great hero when they came in. And so it was. I was sitting up at the back of the hall, where I always sit, in the dark. I had upon my lap a silver dagger. A charm against such a creature's perhaps. When I heard, far off, a sound like thunder rising. A green light seemed to grow outside, and very slowly the door opened. My tongue rose to scream, but my voice was choked. I pricked my hand with the silver dagger, and as the blood flowed, all I could manage was a "Ach!" which woke my lord up, and he looked, but was caught in the charm, and could say nothing. As a long hand came into the hall, long and hoary, and felt around, and beyond it we could see an arm and muscles, and a green light filled the hall, and a smell of rotten flesh. And all of a sudden, the hand grabbed one of the sleeping warriors and was gone. And there was a far-off strangled scream, and a sound like plunging into muddy water, and gone. And then Hrothgar woke up, and all his companions woke up, and we told our story. And they wondered at it. But we all sat. I stoked a fire that night. And the next morning we rode out, and there was the pools, looking stagnant than ever. A green mist hanging over them. The duckweed choking. Hrothgar, who's brave, he took his biggest sword, he poked about a bit, but he couldn't see anything, beyond that there'd been a heavy creature go in. Then all of a sudden one of the men screamed and pointed. There was a helmet of the warrior taken, and in it a head, blue eyes looking out in the world one last time. We went back to the hall. Hrothgar said we must stick with charms, and I told them about the silver swords, and they took out their finest daggers. And brave men as they are, even if they are fools, they all agreed to stay awake that night. What good does that do? All that meant was that we were awakened, and all heard it together. The sound, like something rising from the mud. We tried to move our limbs, but they would not move. We tried to scream, but we could not scream. As something came through the dark. This time, the door opened, and we saw a pair of green eyes looking at us, ringed with red, and two arms stretched out and snagged two of the warriors as they stood there, unable to move. And lifting them up, the figure seemed to crack them under where their armpit would be, and was gone. We ran out as soon as we could, which was lighting torches on the way, down to the pool, but all was tumult, and blood coming up through the water, and a single foot. We shivered. But Hrothgar wasn't defeated yet. He had a mass, according to the new ways, said in the long halls, and then he called upon his own divinities, Odin and Hrothgar and Dunaya, to defend them. And once again his bravest men stood watch, and I stood with them. And as the night got to be as dark as it can be, we heard it once again. The soft splish, splosh was something coming. The sound like thunder. Beat, beat, beat it went. The very ground shook, and the door this time blew in. And there it was. Green eyes, long arms, claws. Now Thruthgeir's charm worked well enough that one warrior landed a blow upon its arm. But its arm was made of scales, harder than any mail, and all he got for his privilege was the fact that the long fingers closed round his neck. And then he reached to the other side and took down a spearman who had also broken the charm and was about to throw his barb. And then the creature turned and went. But before it went, it looked over its shoulder one last time and licked its lips. Well, the next morning, Thruthgar's hall emptied. The town emptied. We all fled to the halls. None of us dared stay there overnight ever again, we thought. It was my job to keep the hall fires burning, but not at night. We kept the hall against the hero to come. But we hid on the hills, and in the towns and in the countryside, the creature stalked at will. There was a rumour of him coming long before he came. A long bolt, warriors from the ancient land, followers of the new ways, they said, but all their charms were of the old. And before them a mighty king's son, Beowulf he called himself. I had seldom seen a man so finely made, or so confident in himself. He said he would keep the watch that night, him and his men. And then Thruthgeir looked at me and said I would stay as well, for I knew this creature. I took my silver dagger with me that night, but I never forget. The men lay. Now they weren't used to this creature, and their stupor fell upon them. Long before the sound, like the shaking earth, and the two footfalls, squish, squash, squish, and the door blew open, and there it were, in its fury, its mouth open, black and red, as it looked in greed, and reached, and such was its hunger, struck a man there and then. Beowulf's spearman, his champion it killed. The great hero seemed to be stuck in a stupor. Now, I had slept right by him, and I had put my silver dagger under his bedclothes, fearing this. And I nicked him then. I nicked him with the dagger that the pain would go through him, and suddenly he woke up in a fear of fury, throwing aside his cloak. And taking not a sword, for he had none to pierce the hide, he broke off the hand that reached him, pulled and yanked the arm, until it all came, and with a howl of fury and a howl of terror, the creature fled into the dark. Well, everyone heard the scream, and such was the rejoicing. Of course, they forgot my part, but I didn't push it much. All that happened was at one point in the evening of the next day, Beowulf pointed to the prick on the very palm of his hand it was, and looked at me and smiled. So we all went to bed the next night, as happy could be. Only I woke up at the hour the creature always came. I woke. I don't know why I woke. Perhaps some old memory. and there I heard it. The splash, splish, and then the beats coming again and again and again, but this time it was bigger, fiercer. This time with the door smashed open, the figure had to stoop down as it reached out and dragged two men. Now I was nowhere near Beowulf. I could not reach him with my blade, and he slept on the throne with the rest. As the Lady Greenfire, Green Hair herself, grabbed two of his finest warriors, choking in their sleep, and took them back to the hall. I don't think I will ever forget the despair that went through the hall that morning. Beowulf wept for his hearth companions. Hrothgar said that all was lost. The creature had come again, and again would come again. At the end I piped up and I said what I knew, that there were only two, that this was the mother, come for revenge, and that her son must still live. And then Beowulf took a long thoughtful look outside on the mist and on the rain, and said, "Do they breathe air, these creatures?" And I said, yes, they weren't fish. They would be somewhere under the reeds, not too distant either, something like a cave. And he smiled. And he had a bladder of a sheep filled with air. And he put upon his eyes a mask, the kind the warriors use in battle, but took no other weapon with him. And he had me guide him to the tarn, and there he pointed to where the feet had gone into the water. And carefully he went in himself, into the middle of an iris bed it were, going careful, following as it were signs he could see. All of a sudden there was a splash and he was gone. I and Hrothgar alone watched. Of all the vigils, I think that was the worst. How long it were I don't know. Hrothgar might be able to tell you. He was cunning and watching the ways of the sky. But I only knew that I should have been hungry waiting, for it was that long. When suddenly there came a great bubbling up, and the pond seemed to go black, as if black blood was spilled. And then there was a moment waiting, like a pause, and it did it again. And this time there was red in it, and Hrothgar pulled out his hair and said, "He's gone! You did well, but not well enough." But I said my charms, and stayed, and told Hrothgar to stay as well. And then there was a sound, a splash, that such a man would make as he landed. And we looked, not where he had landed, but further along. There was Beowulf emerging, his head full of rushes, with such a tale to tell. That he had problems finding the cave in the peat, that he'd only seen it at the last, just as he was going to have to turn up, because they had a cold fire in it, burning. And he'd followed that light and had emerged quietly in the back of the cave. And there was the mother roasting one of the bodies. For her son, Lord Green for Hair, was by her, but his arm was missing, and he was mortally ill. And then Beowulf roared his fury, seeing them eat the leg of his past companion. And the lady herself went for him, all arms and legs and flashing teeth, all eyes that look. He shivered to tell us the story of how he had struck down with all his might and main, and in his hand he had held a silver weight that he had taken with him to weigh him down to swim. and he brought it full down on her head as she reached her hands towards him and put her head, meaning to bite off his. Full down on her neck he brought that silver weight, and she felt stunned back, and she didn't get up again, for Beowulf was on her, pulling at her neck, twisting round until she was dead, and then he dispatched the sun. And at last, to prove what he had done, he cut off a finger of both. He laid the fingers before Throskir. Mighty talons they were. And there was such a feast, such a rejoicing, that the hall was cleansed at last. And at the end of it, Throskir came to me and said that I would be free from this moment on, no longer a churl, that I could ride with his war party as one of them if I liked, or return with Beowulf. And I smiled. And I said I want to take only the silver weight, and I'll go to my own people in the west and be forgotten. And so the heroes feasted, and I left. For in truth, the darkness never quite left me, and it was only going to the far-off hills of the home, and seeing my Dara again, and feeling the warmth of his fire, that the horror quite left me for good.